Everyone for joining us today. Today's Learning Network session is about Handle with Care, which is a partnership between law enforcement and educators to mitigate the impact of trauma on kids. I'm Lauren Block, and I will be facilitating today's conversation. For those of you who do not know about Handle with Care is a program that helps law enforcement partner with schools and daycare centers to notify teachers and childcare workers when a child has been present at the scene of a traumatic event. With just a little bit of information, teachers and childcare workers can really help mitigate negative effects that are caused by children's exposure to traumatic situations. And Handle with Care is a fantastic example of sort of the principles and ideas that we are trying to promote through Pathways to Resilience to promote cross-sector work. We have 4 fantastic speakers with us today coming from different perspectives. We have Andrea Darr, who is the director of the West Virginia Center for Children's Justice. We have Becky Haas, who is an author, speaker, and trainer. We have Teri Lawler, who's an education associate and for the trauma-informed practices and social emotional learning in the Delaware Department of Education. And then we have Zoe Lyons, who is the director for Jackson County of Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And these wonderful women are each coming from a slightly different perspective and are going to share their insights about how they've worked on Handle with Care and implemented, and really focus on sharing best and promising practices that you can take back to your communities. Today's webinar will be posted to the web. We'll also be posting our takeaways after the fact. We do encourage active engagement. Please really use the chat or raise your hand if you have questions. We aren't going to wait till the end for questions. We want you to be engaged throughout. So please feel free to ask questions throughout the session today. So what I'd like to do is start with Andrea Darr, who's going to give a little bit of background on the history of Handle with Care and how it works. So Andrea, take us away, please.
Okay, let me pull this up and share my screen. Okay. Are y'all able to see it? Let me see.
We see your screen, but not your, there you go.
Now do you see it?
We do, yeah. If you want.
Okay, we're good to go.
Just want to go into the slideshow. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Are we good?
Perfect.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here today. Thanks for the invite. My name is Andrea Darr, and I'm the director of the West Virginia Center for Children's Justice at the West Virginia State Police. Before I get started, I want to give you a takeaway. Everything we're going to talk about is on a website called handlewithcarewv.org. Don't forget to put the WV on the end of it because you won't get to our website. And when you get there, go to the Handle with Care tab right here, and you'll find all kinds of information. There's my contact information that's on the website as well. So my background is victim assistance. I did direct services, and I also manage a grant that looks at the investigation, prosecution, and resolution of child abuse cases. We want to respond better, faster. We want better outcomes for our kids, and we want to do it in a way that doesn't cause further harm. So to that end, we created a program called Handle with Care. And I want to tell you a little bit about the program first, and then kind of how we got it started, a little bit of nuance on the program, and then we're going to pass it around to other people to give their expertise on it. So Handle with Care is about helping children succeed to the very best of their ability, regardless of what hard place they come from. Between the drug epidemic, the pandemic, and poverty, it's really tough to be an at-risk kid now. The drugs are making the poverty worse, and the children are paying a very high price. Trauma at home often translates into trauma at school, both for the students and the staff. Just because you walk in the doors doesn't mean that trauma goes away. It comes in with you, and it has a huge effect on that child's ability to learn. There's lots of kids, as you know, that don't have a grown-up at home in their life, or a grown-up that's present at home to take care of them, make sure they do their homework, get them clean clothes, get them to school on time. And these kids are walking in the door, and usually student staff has no idea what is going on. So again, Handle with Care is aimed at ensuring that children exposed to crime, violence, and abuse receive appropriate interaction so they can succeed. Research tells us that trauma can undermine that child's ability to learn, form relationships, and function appropriately in the classroom. We must address the trauma if children are going to succeed. So where did it come from, first of all? I'm not sure if y'all remember back in 2009, there was a big national survey that said that 60% of children had been exposed to crime, violence, and abuse, and 40% had been direct victims of 2 or more violent acts. That prompted the then Attorney General Eric Holder to launch the Defending Childhood Initiative, charging all states with coming up for some program to address this. That survey showed everyone this was an epidemic across the country, and we all needed to be doing something to address it. So a friend of mine at the U.S. Attorney's Office, who's victim witness there, called me and said, hey, we already have a task force. We already have a group looking at the issues. Let's form a subcommittee there and come up with our own Defending Childhood initiative. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's look what other people are doing. So that's what we did. In 2011, we formed the subcommittee and we looked around at what everyone was doing. We picked the parts that we needed for West Virginia based on our needs. And at that time, the drug crisis was raging, and it still is. We had a lot of pills coming in. We had a lot of kids living in poverty. The drug crisis made the poverty so much worse. So we knew we had to do something to help them. And it only made sense to do it at the school, because why? Where do all kids have to go? School, right? So it made sense that the intervention would happen at the school. So we created our program, ran it by all the bosses who said, you can and cannot do this. You can't do this because it violates my policy. It might not violate yours, but it violates mine. You can't do this because it might jeopardize victim safety. You can't do this for all kinds of reasons. So our program looked different in the beginning, but as everyone told us what we could and couldn't do, it just kind of got stripped down all the way down to 3 words: handle with care. That's all they left us with. That's all we could get for the buy-in from all the people at the table is 3 words: handle with care. So we said, no problem, we will make it work. Our program is based on the understanding that if you understand trauma, you don't need details. All you need are those 3 words: handle with care. That's going to get you to turn on your trauma lens. And when that child walks through the door, you're going to have that trauma lens on and be understanding and be able to see through whatever that behavior is happening to what's going on underneath. So we piloted this program. It worked in our head. We had to pilot it, see if it worked in the schools. And we did that in 2013. Realized very quickly school staff loved this. Law enforcement, a little bit harder to get on board, but we're going to address that here in a few minutes. But schools and law enforcement, they didn't get in the business they're in to make a lot of money. They actually really care about people and they want to help. And so this program is really easy to get the buy-in from them once they understand what we're trying to do. So we piloted it, and then we realized, it's completely first responder led. Without that, we don't have a program. So we needed to be in a first law enforcement agency. So the colonel at the state police invited us over here to get the troopers to help launch it in 2015. And so between 15 and 18, we went to all 55 of our counties at least one time. And here's just a lesson learned. A lot of times you have to go back 2 or 3 times. But while we were expanding there, we were also expanding all over the country, and Handle with Care is everywhere. I want to give you a situation to show you how Handle with Care works. So 2 in the morning, law enforcement is called to the scene. Kids present. There are a couple of grown-ups there. I learned this, that we call them grown-ups. I asked someone in Casa, what do we call the children's guardians? And she said, always say it's grown-ups, and everybody understands. The kids understand, the adults understand. So there's 2 grown-ups there. 2 in the morning, maybe one grown-up goes to the hospital. Maybe one grown-up is arrested. Maybe the kid packs up what they need and grandma lives next door and they go there. Or maybe they go to a trusted neighbor. Or maybe they have to take all their belongings and go to foster care. But it's 2 in the morning, all this chaos is going on. They probably don't go to sleep till 4 or 5 in the morning. The next day, odds are, where are they? They're at school. Do they have their homework? Probably not. Are they bombing a test? Probably. Are they tired? Probably. Hungry? But that's the state that they're coming into the classroom, and the teacher has no idea. And usually this situation is a little bit chronic and everybody is frustrated. So a lot of the times the teacher is wondering, what's wrong with you? Why can't you study for that test? Why can't you remember your homework? Not knowing all this chaos has gone on with these kids. So that's just a situation to let you know that's how Handle with Care is applicable. What we're going to do is just alert that school to turn on that trauma lens. So Handle with Care is 3 parts, and most people that hear about it just think notice. It's a notice, but it's so much more than that. It is never okay to identify a child without being able to help them, do something to help them. So what we do is first responders, and when I say first responders, we've expanded from law enforcement to EMS because of all the overdoses in the fire departments. We want all first responders to participate. So the first part of the program is them sending the heads up, them sending that notice over to the school before the start of the next school day. Schools, the second part of the program is schools prepping trauma sensitive supports for these kids. Like I said, when the kid gets there, the schools need to know what is trauma, what it does to a developing brain, what it looks like in the classroom, and what they can do to mitigate those negative effects so that child can learn. We found that most children could be helped just like that with very simple school supports: food, sleep, help with homework, postponing a test. But there's a group of these kids that really need to get some mental health services. So the third part of our program is mental health services on site. And with parental permission, children can get services at the school. Why at the school? A lot of parent transportation's an issue, right? A lot of parents are working 2 or 3 jobs to keep the lights on. Rural areas, there is no transportation, and a lot of times the kids' appointments are not the priority in the home, and we're not even going to go there. So we just want therapy on site with parental permission for the kids that need it. That is a really fast overview of Handle with Care, but we're open to questions, so please chime in. But I want to leave you with where Handle with Care is around the country. And where it's blue, it's Handle with Care statewide, or they have capacity to do it statewide. Where it's purple, they're developing it, and where it's yellow, they have interest in it. They've called our office and they're looking for information. This is the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more programs than this, but I just wanted to give you a general idea. It's hard to keep up with all the programs. But in Nevada, the reason it's blue, they passed a law saying all first responders had to send a Handle with Care notice. Oklahoma has a system to send the Handle with Care notices already set up, which is usually the hard part for everybody, but they have that going on. Kentucky and West Virginia, it's led through the state police, and they have a really strong effort there. And in New Jersey, the AG wrote it into policy. So you can see Handle with Care works in all different ways. It's in law, it's in policy, and it's in mandates. I want to stop sharing my screen with you if I can figure that out. One last thing, I showed you a map of where Handle with Care is. What I didn't tell you is that I even got an email from a law enforcement officer on an island off the coast of Australia asking if they could do Handle with Care. Why? Because it works. It's good for kids. It really doesn't cost any money. It's just learning to meet your partners in the field and collaborate for the best interest of the child. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. And we do have a couple of questions that have already come in through registrations that they'll pose. And again, I want to encourage folks use the chat to ask questions or add comments. I'd like to, that was a great overview. I'd like to now turn to Zoe and then Teri to talk a little bit about how you've generated buy-in from law enforcement and the education sectors, and telling us a little bit about who have been your key partners in implementation in the community, state, local agencies and such. So Zoe, why don't you introduce yourself and then go ahead and get started.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Zoe Lyons. I am the county director for a Department of Health and Human Services office, which is our state office in Michigan. So in my office, we have Children's Protective Services, foster care, Medicaid, food assistance, and adult protective services. So all of those sort of governmental programs And I'm going to be really specific because Andrea always says, make sure that you know that this is not Children's Protective Services related. I am involved, frankly, because I read an article about what Andrea was doing in West Virginia, and I couldn't get the idea of it out of my mind. And what was happening when Michigan went up, when I first heard about it, it was 2016. So what was happening around the country was a lot of unrest, particularly in Ferguson, Missouri, around the shooting of Michael Brown, and a lot of unrest between our communities of color and law enforcement. And locally, I worked very closely with law enforcement and my community. And this idea of a space where law enforcement can work together with the community was just really exciting to me. And we also, of course, work with our schools if we're talking about child welfare. And so it really, every little piece of it was something that seemed to just fit for our community. And so I called Andrea, I got some information, and I made I put some folders together for just a couple of our school superintendents. So those are the heads of our school districts here in Michigan, and a couple chiefs of police. And I started by sending them the email article. And I said, don't respond to me. I just want you to read it and think about it for a little bit. Well, 3 of the 4 people didn't follow my direction. They emailed me right back and said, we need to do this here. This is amazing. And so we came together. We talked about it. A couple of our chiefs of police, their wives are teachers. One of the superintendents, of course, used to be a teacher, and his wife is a teacher. And so this idea of how our children are coming to school affected by the trauma they experience was in their lives every day as well. And so we went to West Virginia and were trained on it. We had all of our questions answered. And when we came back, we set up meetings with our all of the chiefs of police in our community and all of our superintendents. And I'll tell you, we initially thought about doing it in one police agency and one school district as a pilot. But we have school of choice here. And so, as Andrea mentioned, we have to make this as easy as possible for our law enforcement officers. And so if they had to do too much work to figure out, only this school district, it would not be easy. So we said, let's just go big and do our entire county. We met with our chiefs and with our superintendents, and honestly, it sells itself. There was literally no one who said no to it. Everyone said, let's do this. And so the conversation is just really about how simple this can be, that, each sort of leg of those 3 steps of Handle with Care are easy for the folks that they're doing it, right? I think the hardest part at the school level, when we first started this in 2017, trauma-informed schools, it was out there, but it wasn't as like everyone now knows what a trauma-informed school is, right? Every school teacher, having gone through COVID, understands trauma. And so, law enforcement was willing to do their piece. The schools were willing to do their piece. And then that 3rd step of on-site mental health, we had a specific organization that said, we will take this on. And that's now actually been ingrained in our whole child collaborative work within our county intermediate school district. So I think I'm going to pause there and maybe let Teri speak a little bit more, and then we can answer questions as they come up as well. Teri?
Thank you. So a little bit different from Zoe's implementation. We are a small state and our mantra has been going slow to go fast. So we did a lot of early foundational work to get things off the ground. Very early on, our governor's Family Services Cabinet Council, which consists of agency secretaries from all of the state agencies. We all come together. We have representatives who are leading the trauma work. And so we had our First Lady, as well as the Office of the Child Advocate and the Child Protection Accountability Commission, really pushing for us to learn more. All of them had heard about Handle with Care. We set up an early conversation with Andrea to get some information. And from there, the intent was to build or integrate this work into our whole child efforts to eradicate, reduce, and eliminate the non-academic barriers to learning. And trauma-informed practices is a foundational step in that process. We had some early barriers. First of all, we already had a program in our state that was named Handle with Care. So our implementation became Take Care Delaware. Secondly, when first reaching out to law enforcement, we realized that a big barrier for us was that traditionally youth at a 911 call were treated as witnesses, not victims. And so we had to go to the legislature and have House Bill 74 implemented. And once that passed, now we're very happy to say that since July of 2019, youth are now treated as victims. And so with the advent of House Bill 74, we were able to start a pilot project. We started out in one district with all of our state police participating, and the county or jurisdiction that was serving that particular school district worked with us for the implementation. That started just prior to the pandemic. At this point, we have 14 districts and 13 law enforcement organizations participating with us. We are a state of 19 districts, so we're almost at full implementation, but really excited to see all of this work really integrated into our approach to build a more responsive, more resilient community. We needed to have strong relationships. We do have school resource officers, and so we needed strong relationships with law enforcement in our area. We've done some offered amazing training opportunities, actually brought Becky Haas in to work with our law enforcement officers, but have built in trainings for de-escalation into our capacity building with the intent of our educators, law enforcement, out of school time providers, everyone serving youth, being able to join forces, learn some of the same concepts, so that when we put that trauma lens on, it's also resilience oriented, so that we are building those positive experiences, protective factors to mitigate the challenges that young people face.
Thank you, Teri. I'd now like to turn it to Becky, who is a trainer, to talk about how her approach to training law enforcement personnel to implement Handle with Care, and to talk about what tends to resonate with law enforcement. So, Becky.
Thanks, Lauren, and it's great to be here today as a member of the Pathways to Resilience Advisory Board. It's really an honor to be part of this learning event, and for many years now, I've had the pleasure of working with Andrea and Teri as such respected colleagues, and it's really been great to hear about Zoe's work as we've been marching forward to this event. So I was working for the Johnson City, Tennessee Police Department, and we were a very early implementer of Handle with Care. And as we go back in Andrea's timeline, 2017, 2018, we were among the first in another state that came and they rolled it out. And so I saw really from the ground up, where at first we had some barriers getting the information on our electronic officer system. We used paper, and just like Andrea and Teri and Zoe have already shared, there are barriers, but why I'm honored to be in a group like this is, when we see the the good of the community and the good of kids, we don't take no for an answer. And there's a way to move forward. And so as an early implementer, and then in 2020, my own state of Tennessee began working with Andrea to, under the leadership of Governor Bill Lee, to have a coordinator. The Tennessee Chiefs Association first was beginning to roll this out. And then later it moved to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, because we realized that if we just have it under the chiefs, then what about our sheriffs? So we're navigating this as a state as well, and they've involved me in training. As Teri mentioned, I was up in Delaware, training Delaware State Police. I've also trained Oklahoma City Police and their initiative, and West Virginia, Martinsburg, some other states. But when I went to Delaware, one of the things I saw is that in the rolling out of Handle with Care, Andrea's done a great job on her website of really walking you through it. All the resources, the forms, the sample MOUs, letters, how to reach out to law enforcement schools. It's just such a complete kit. And then when I went to train Delaware State Police in my post-certified trauma-informed policing training, she and her team had really done a great job, where her officers up there, they had some of the basics of understanding trauma. So to your question, Lauren, a lot of what the training that I go in is to help law enforcement really understand in a deeper dive about trauma, and to understand, and one of the things I see, to Zoe's point about national tensions around law enforcement and communities of color, communities of different culture, is that law enforcement, there's real openness now and a shift in thinking that more and more are realizing how much of their work is like social work. And so with trauma-informed policing, they're skilling up to be able to address a lot of the things that they do in their job, where maybe they didn't have this kind of training in the academy. So my training, it's been post-certified in Tennessee now, 4 years. We're working on a 5th year. It's been CLEAT certified in the state of Oklahoma, which means that it's approved for accreditation hours for officers. So in that, I cover the basics of what is trauma. A lot of this is around SAMHSA materials. I talk about how to understand and identify trauma behaviors, because key to this conversation with both teachers and law enforcement is to know the difference between willful behavior and survival behavior. And then we talk about really peer evidence-based practices that help law enforcement to de-escalate trauma on scene for children. And then as I give examples of programs that are true plumb line of trauma-informed policing, Handle with Care really leads the charge there, and help to see why it's so effective. So really, one of the last things I want to say is that many times in my work nationally to build resilient, focused communities, people are reluctant to reach out to police, but Handle with Care is such a great program in the fact that if there's one topic that's a high priority to your law enforcement, it's school safety. And you as educators and community builders, there's already an open seat there at the table. And so to begin to talk to law enforcement about a way to really extend school safety is something they're already very interested in. And as the others have mentioned, I'll just chime in, I usually find very little reluctance to rolling out this program.
Thanks, Becky. And we have a question from Kristen Roberts in the chat. Anyone can feel free to start answering this. A great question. How do the first responders send the notice or referral to the school? I know there's different levels of technological sophistication in different states and communities. So Andrea, I don't know if you want to start or
I can start. And the first thing I want to say is if it's not easy, it's not going to happen, period. Second thing I will say is you can't teach passion. Whoever is in charge of doing it needs to understand why it's so important, both at the school system, the law enforcement end, and the school system end. So what needs to happen is that notice. Let me just say, when we started this program, we told law enforcement, if you think this child's been traumatized, then send the notice. That was the wrong thing to tell a law enforcement officer. What they see they see so much, and it's so traumatic that they don't understand even their presence sometimes can, trigger that kid. So we say now, if you're there and kids are present, check the box. Children present, yes, name, age, and school, period, the end. Fill it in. If children are there, check the box, name, age, and school. Don't try to judge whether or not that child has been traumatized, because it's not your place to judge. What affects one person is not going to affect another person. So again, this is how they think, this is how they're trained. Check the box and get that information. So most people in our state do an email followed by a text. At school, the first thing in the morning is the busiest time for the principal and the leadership at school. And a lot of times they don't check that email, So a lot of times they like text to come in because it's just faster and they can see that. So email and text. So about a third of our counties, we have 55, go through dispatch, 911 non-emergency dispatch. So if dispatch has that contact at the school, law enforcement officers can just call it in, and dispatch can also nudge the notice, hey, is there a handle with care that goes along with this call? So that's just a gentle reminder to send it. We have one county that's all sophisticated and got a QR code, and they just went from, this county, we couldn't get it going. We tried for 5 years and could not get law enforcement going. That county hired a liaison between law enforcement and the schools. He made Handle with Care a priority. Their mental health provider created a QR code. So the cops just open up their phone, open up their camera, bam, there's a email that goes to 4 people. The law enforcement officer, the superintendent, the school, the mental health provider in that community, and it's gone. San Diego, California created an app. They are the 10th largest school district in the country. So they created their own app. And a lot of people are doing that. But if you ever run into someone selling you an app, we do not support that. We're very strict on, you got to remember, this notice is only to help that kid. You know what I mean? Address that trauma as quickly as possible. And it's only 3 words, handle with care. You never get any details. And we do not want that notice saved in this kid's personal file. That's not what this is about. If someone's going to have an app, that better drop off that app, as soon as they send it. We do not keep these notices. And so just remember that. And I'm going to pass it off to you guys.
Zoe or Teri, do either of you want to go ahead, Teri?
Sure, I'll jump in. Well, first of all, Becky alluded to our capacity building, or I guess the sophistication at which our police officers arrived at her training. That's because we spent the year prior to Becky coming, doing our awareness training with law enforcement. And that awareness training includes the brain architecture game. And so for us, it's really beyond, we wanted deep learning about how stress and toxic stress and adversity impact the brain and the body. We started out with paper notices, and we've we're creating a dashboard. We'll see it for the first time actually this upcoming Friday, but things will move into an electronic space going forward. And we have, through our partnership with Andrea and the Handle with Care National Network, we are taking a look at the work in San Diego, and also the QR code, just to see if they can enhance what we're planning. But with that dashboard, the notices would go straightly into the DelGIS system in our state, which pushes out to all of the superintendents, but it also records attendance data, all of the big educational data, so that we're really tracking and being able to take a look at how this event is impacting student progress.
Zoe, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think just in Michigan, we are in the process right now of a computer application being piloted. So what I hadn't said is we have now expanded from just my county to, we are in 46 other states. We also have a statewide advisory and a state office that Handle with Care. And so we've been able to create this computer application so that the officers can do it right from their computers in their cars. And so we feel like once we get that into a place that works well for everyone, we'll be able to get this out to the entire state. But currently, it's the computer application sends an email, and if they're not in the pilot, then most of them are emailing those notices to the schools.
So it sounds like the takeaway really is whatever is easiest is the way to go. And if you can use technology, do it, and keep it simple and don't use judgment in what you send. We got another question submitted through registration. We've touched on some of this a little bit already. This person said that they are working to develop a statewide task force to begin legislative efforts and statewide implementation of Handle with Care, and are asking about any insights. Andrea, I don't know if you can speak at all to, where states have passed legislation for this that might be good models, or Zoe, Teri, or Becky, and also again, statewide task forces. I know Zoe, you talked before about sort of starting small and now you're getting bigger. So Andrea, do you want to kick us off here?
I will. And with law enforcement, you've got two options. Do you want the hammer making it, or do you want the buy-in from them? And so you've just got to feel that out and see what works. Here, we want the buy-in. It's a slow process, but we want the buy-in. You got to be careful hammering it, legislation, because a lot of times you'll get a little pushback from that. But everyone around the country does it differently. And like you said, whatever works for you is the way that you need to do it. I will say though, however you do it, you have to have an accountability piece. If you're doing the buy-in, someone in leadership at that law enforcement agency needs to check those reports and make sure that they're going through, or it's not going to happen. No one wants one more thing to do. So when law enforcement hears about this, oh, it's one more piece of paperwork I have to do. And they don't get a lot of feedback. Here's a little hint, 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 hint. We learned late in the game. Give the schools feedback. Just let them know that it was appreciated and that you were able to help that child. And so accountability and feedback is going to help you get that going. Nevada passed a law, like I said. New Jersey, the AG put it in protocol. It's just going to depend on your state. So I'm going to turn it over to someone else to address that. Becky, do you have any insight on that?
Well, yeah, I'm going to circle back with you, Andrea, in the fact that in me working with the Tennessee Chiefs Association, and now Evangeline with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, I'm pretty sure it's been at the state level, the governor level, that Tennessee to roll this out. And we do have a Tennessee Handle with Care website. And I was pleased to record my post-certified training that law enforcement across 95 counties of Tennessee can log in and receive that training in 1 hour blocks, self-paced. And then I recorded training for teachers. And so I think one of the common themes that we're hearing here is in getting it done, there are a lot of roads to travel. And so it's not really one size fits all. And you do have to listen to both your responders and your educators and just find what path that helps to work. So I think in our website for Handle with Care, there's some of the instructions of options for communicating back and forth schools. I do know that there was some legislation that was passed on to me earlier this year, that it was clear in the legislation it's not a part of the child's permanent record. Apparently in the initial information that went out in our state of Tennessee, that was not clear, and now something was amended to clearly mention that.
Teri, Zoe, do either of you have legislation?
We do not have legislation, but we have found that the personal touch is the best way. As Andrea said earlier, things that work in your head don't always work in practice. And so being able to create a sense of readiness with the law enforcement leaders as well as the school leaders has allowed us, I think, to get a sense of where people are in being ready to implement, and then going back and forth to check on progress and make sure things are going as we planned.
And Zoe, do you have legislation?
we do not have legislation in place. I'll leave it at that in case you want to just go on to another question.
Okay, that sounds good. Yes, we have another question from Rachel Gilgoff. And this is actually the question I was going to ask next. So thank you, Rachel. What are some of the barriers that you've come across in getting Handle with Care implemented and scaled, and how have you overcome them? And we can start with Teri on this one. Maybe if you'd like to address any barriers that you faced.
Sure. I mean, I think early barriers were just needing that sense of readiness, wanting to make sure that sharing this information with the schools would not put the children in more emotional jeopardy, so to speak, by having the teachers, that feeling that the teachers knew more than they were able to respond to. We wanted to make sure that we had some saturation in trauma sensitive practices and supports for young people. And so I think, some would see the need for readiness as a barrier. We wanted to make sure that our districts had training cadres who were facilitating the work, and that also that, as I said, that our community members, including law enforcement, have participated in the brain architecture game experience. Once we were able to do that, the pandemic created a barrier for us. We were in the middle of our pilot and weren't able to move forward because we weren't able to meet the metrics that we wanted to at that point. And then just thinking about the importance of maintaining a certain sense of confidentiality around this work and assuring that families were supported and not re-traumatized through the experience, by blaming and shaming and just not having the support that was needed to make sure that the young people could participate in school fully and go on with their learning.
Thanks. And we have two questions that I'd kind of like to merge and have as a follow-up to Rachel's question about potential barriers. So one of the questions is about whether there are privacy law barriers. The other question is about whether or not there have been any evaluations of the impact of the program and whether there's data on referrals and follow-up with kids. And I know, Andrea, I'd like to start with you on this one because I know in terms of what data are actually sent, you've already addressed the fact of not saving things, but what is the actual information that's being sent over in exchange that can help with this, but also any other issues that any of you would like to raise. Certainly evaluation is helpful, but I know the type of data might be different than what one might expect. So Andrea, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Confidentiality. We are not violating confidentiality. We are giving you no information. No details should ever be sent. And you're going to get a little kickback from teachers saying, but we need to know more. And the bottom line is, no, they don't. They need to understand trauma. They don't need to know more. And let's face it, the little guys are going to talk to them anyway, right? But just because you get a Handle with Care notice does not mean you approach a child. It's just giving you the ability to be proactive instead of reactive. The last thing a child wants after a long, hard night is everyone pouncing on them. And you know what I learned at the conference this year? This guy came up to me and said, I was that kid. And he said, when I went to school, I was that kid. They didn't really like me. I wasn't prepared. I wasn't doing well. And my house burned down. And all of a sudden, all these people that ignored me are my friend. And they're coming up to me offering their support. I didn't trust any of that. So I thought that was eye-opening. So just remember, just because you get the notice doesn't mean you approach that child. And if anyone bucks you on this a little bit about the confidentiality, do y'all have in your newspaper where the police lists, I was at this house on this date for this reason? They just gave you so much more information than Handle with Care will ever give you, because all you're going to get is 3 words. And all we're doing is giving to the school the name of a child already known to the school, okay? It's not like violating the FERPA thing. That's information going out. We're giving you something that you already know. The second thing I'm going to answer real quick and then let everyone else. You want me to do this together, the evaluation piece. In the last 3 years, we've partnered with SRI International, that's Stanford Research Institute. And I'll back up and say, for the first 7 years, we never had a dime for this program. We never had any money. We just wrote it into our job description, and we always wanted evaluation, and evaluations are expensive. But we partnered with SRI, and they created a tool, an implementation monitoring tool for Handle with Care. Go to handlewithcarewv.org, go to Handle with Care for Schools. There's a brand new tab on the Handle with Care for Schools, and it's an implementation and monitoring tool. And what it is an Excel spreadsheet. So each school will just have a designated data collector, and they can fill that out, and it monitors how you implement. Have you done everything you should to implement Handle with Care, which is on our website? Then how many notices affecting how many kids, how many of those went to counseling, how many of those went to therapy? It has input for achievement, attendance, and disruptions that you can put all that in there. And at any given moment, it will spit out where you are in time. It gives you all the data in time on what's going on with these kids. And it measures the Handle with Care kids against the general population of kids to let you see trends, so you can use data to make your decisions about what's going on. Then I got a different grant, and they had money for an evaluation. And so we have a program called Handle with Care 2.0 going on with SRI Education in 6 schools in Berkeley County. What that means is we took that implementation tool, gave it to those 6 schools. We also recorded 12 15-minute videos for teachers and staff to learn about trauma, ACEs, interventions in the classroom. Those videos aren't up yet, but they're going to be up shortly, and they're going to be free. And they're little 15-minute nuggets, because not everyone has an hour. And it will be created so you can register, and and get an attendance certificate. So if a principal needs to know everyone's been trained on this, you can take it and take that certificate back. So that Handle with Care 2.0 project that we're working on, we're having that evaluated, and the results will come out on December 7th at our Children's Justice Task Force meeting. And we're very, very excited. It would have been a whole different ball game if there wasn't a pandemic going on. Can you imagine trying to do all this during a pandemic, pilot a tool, get the teachers going back to school when the kids were coming back? It was crazy. It's still crazy, but it is what it is. That's when we had the funding. And so that's when we evaluated it. Just bear in mind, it probably would look a lot different without the pandemic. So I would first like to open it up to you guys to see if you've had kickback about privacy. Anyone, and how you've answered it.
We did not. I mean, I think that there were a couple of our law enforcement agencies that sent it to their attorneys. But every time that's happened, they've come back and said there's no privacy issues. I will say the one thing that I was concerned about, and I think I called Andrea 10 times before we went live, is how do the parents feel? Do the families get upset? And she kept saying, it's not a thing. It is not a thing. People don't get upset. And now I can say that all these years, the only parent that ever reached out to me was someone who said, my ex-husband tried to break into our house last night, and it was an extremely difficult experience for my children. And the police were there, but I want to make sure a Handle with Care notice goes to each of their schools. Can you make sure of that for me? That's literally the only parent that has ever contacted me. And so that is another thing that has just been really clear for us in terms of experience as well.
Very similarly, we've only had one call, and it's been related to a family who wanted the additional services that went along with Handle with Care or Take Care Delaware. We've had 754 incidents that generated 1,039 notices since September of 2021. And we have integrated this work within our multi-tiered systems of support. And so there we're able to track the additional supports that young people get related to the Handle with Care notices. But there is no documentation in the file that, this referral got generated through Take Care Delaware.
Great, and that's a great example of data that you can track about how often it's happening. And the action being taken and that things are being acted upon. So that's wonderful. I would like now to turn to the component that we have for every learning network session and ask that each of you share one or two actionable steps that you believe that states and counties and other community members can be taking to successfully implement Handle with Care in your state or community. So Becky, let's start with you.
Sure, Lauren. And I just want to say thank you to you and Tanya and Pathways to Resilience for a learning initiative as today, because just listening to Andrea and Zoe and Teri, what we've been able to share in 15 minutes, each of us, took months and weeks. And really now we can accelerate this work in other states by standing on the shoulders of some of these great trailblazers that I'm honored to be here with today. So thank you, Pathways. So my takeaway would really be not to shy away from reaching out to law enforcement. Law enforcement, their job description is about 80% social work, and then about 20% probably truly horrifying. And one of the areas of trauma in my training I talk about is officer trauma. And I can tell you, working with many police across the nation, that often there's a stigma around that own trauma. So it's a message that they really latch on to. And so we already have schools and police generally on the same page in every community around school safety, around SROs. I've worked with SROs doing my training that got a car dealership to put the school mascot on a wrap so that the school car, the police car pulls up and immediately this officer is one of the school, you know? And so I just want to encourage you to not shy away from these conversations with law enforcement, because school safety and the safety of children and youth in a community is a #1 priority to law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Teri.
Sure. I want to thank Pathways for having me here today, but I really want to thank Andrea and Becky, because their hard work really just laid the foundation for us. You know, we were able to go faster because of them for sure. And my takeaways would be use your data and stay true to your data. You know, invest in that cross-sector capacity building. When we go back and we evaluate, we do a program evaluation on all of our trauma work. One of the highest rated trainings is our training with Becky. The police officers were really happy to hear, you know, to have attention paid to the work that they were doing and to give them the skills that they needed to better support young people. So we saw that as an investment in the future. And then make sure you monitor your progress. I mean, you know, if it's working, you want to know that. But if something is not working, then that's a good time to go back and do some problem solving. Because, you know, as we've heard before, things work in your head, but they don't always work in your practice.
Thank you. Zoe.
Thank you. So I also just would lead with I don't think any of this would have happened if any of us had called Andrea Darr and she said, sure, for a cost, I can give that information to you. Like, she is like, it's free here, take everything you need, sends it to you. And that has caused all of us to do the same thing. Whenever somebody else calls us, here's our website. Here's all of the free information that you want. We are not trying to make money off this. Nobody is. It is about what is best for our children. So thank you. And then I think the main thing I want to say is that whoever your lead is, so if you are on this call and you want to bring this to your community, you should be someone that has connections or relationship that you can build on with your law enforcement community, with your school community, with your mental health community, really in someone who is connected. If that's not you, if you just want to figure out who that person is in your community, because those initial conversations, those invitations to be part of it, should be between trusted individuals, and you're much more likely to have folks say we're in this with you. And then finally, I also want to say this can be done. It's a lot of work. to organize and keep it together, but every single one of us, as well as others around the community or the country, are here to support your success in doing it. So it's a very manageable, cost-free way to ensure that our children and our communities get what they need.
Thanks, Zoe. And finally, Andrea.
I love what you ladies just said in closing. That was awesome. And just to follow up, there is a model of fidelity on our website under Handle with Care. And part of it is a quarterly meeting check-in just to make sure that, like you said, Teri, do we have any kids falling? Is there something not working here? We want to check in to make sure it works. And I love what you said, Zoe. We give it away, but we give it away with the criteria saying, we always say, but please follow the model of fidelity. Follow the model of fidelity. It is so simple. Handle with Care is so simple. It goes over most people's heads. But when you start doing it, you realize all these layers of benefit, but it's not going to be there if you say, hey, I think I'll do it this way, or I'll do it this way. There's a lot of thought that goes into every little thing. So check out that model of fidelity and have those quarterly check-in meetings, and please just follow that model of fidelity. My advice to you, we actually did this one right. Well, when we decided we wanted to do this, we went to the state superintendent of schools. And we sat down with him and told him exactly what we wanted to do and got his blessing. That way, no matter where we went in the school system, we could say, we've got the superintendent's blessing. That's going to save you so much time on the back end. The next thing, if you're going to do this, you go meet that chief of police. You go meet your sheriff, and you go meet your state police detachment commander. Just go meet him. And if you really want to get in there, take a law enforcement officer with you. Find someone that knows a law enforcement officer that understands what we're trying to do, and they speak their own language, and they might not listen to you, but they're going to listen to one of their own. Do you get what I'm saying? So get your superintendent's blessing, get a law enforcement officer, first responder to go with you and meet those chiefs, the sheriff and the state police, and get them on board. And what I always did was have a stakeholder meeting, again, on the website, lays it all out, even in invitation for that stakeholder meeting, get them on board, go there, and I prep the people that make the decisions, the law enforcement and the school person in charge. And I'll say, listen to what I'm saying and start thinking about how this notice will work. And if you don't mind, I might put you on the spot and let you verbalize that out loud. So that seems to work. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for your interest in Handle with Care, and I'll give it back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrea, Teri, Becky, and Zoe. This has been fantastic. So many actionable insights. The only other thing I want to say is that we will be posting this recording to the website. We'll have our takeaways synthesized as well. And please join us next month. We will be doing a session about engaging individuals with lived experience in the work you're doing and how to ensure meaningful engagement. And we will have individuals with lived experience as our speakers for that session. Thank you to everyone, and hope that you have a wonderful day. Thank you.